In the desperate scramble to Europe, these are considered the lucky ones. Rescued from a dinghy in the middle of the Mediterranean Sea, where there's been record levels of small boat crossings in the last 24 hours.
People are dying in the ocean, so if they make it very easier, people can cross very easily and they will not die, or there is no risking of their life.
But not all have made it the whole way to the Italian island of Lampedusa. At least 34 people are still missing after a boat capsized last night, the fifth here to sink in the last 4 days.
We've got to somehow break the cycle of these criminal gangs.
The UK government says it has a plan to stop all small boat crossings via the Channel, a particular interest for the Prime Minister, who visited the Home Office Joint Control Room in Dover earlier this year and declared this issue as one of his 5 goals for his government.
The Home Secretary has been very clear. We will take all the steps necessary to stop the boats and to make sure that illegal migration is halted. It's absolutely vital that we do so with the confidence of Parliament.
But their plan is an unusual one. When the illegal migration bill was first published, a rare declaration on the cover that there was no guarantee it was compatible with the European Convention on Human Rights. And next week, MPs may go further. Tory rebels currently in talks with the Home Secretary, hoping to amend the bill to stop asylum seekers relying on international law, to halt deportation flights to third countries like Rwanda, and to allow the government to deport migrants even when a human rights challenge is pending. Their threat, if that's not possible, a potential Tory rebellion from the right wing of the party.
They're suggesting that Britain should pull out of the European Convention on Human Rights. To my mind, that's a disaster for the Tory party if it gets itself down that rabbit hole. It's never going to happen. All things like the Northern Ireland Agreement, Good Friday Agreement, are tied up with our membership of it.
So it's devolution in Scotland and Wales.
So it's a complete red herring, and it's not actually got anything to do with solving the problem, which is the one thing we've learned from Brexit, is you don't solve your immigration problems by pulling out of international agreements.
The specific international law is Rule 39, a temporary measure which allows a judge to pause legal proceedings in an emergency, an interim measure MPs are now asking the government to block.
Let's say that interim measure disappears altogether, or we come out of the European Court of Human Rights, because that's also a prospect. Then the door is wide open for our government to effectively do what it wants. So there is a risk. Why any government would want to do that is another thing. But then, it also requires our own courts, because there will still be exceptions to the rule.
I wouldn't be standing here if I didn't think that I could deliver on this promise.
Rebel MPs are due to meet the Prime Minister tomorrow at number 10 before the committee stage of the bill. For Rishi Sunak, another week with yet another test of whether his slogan can really become a reality.
Serena Barker-Singh reporting. The Levelling Up Secretary Michael Gove has confirmed that the sale of laughing gas, or nitrous oxide, is to be banned as part of a crackdown on antisocial behaviour that's expected to be unveiled tomorrow. Mr Gove said silver canisters littering public places were evidence of a practice that could lead to medical harm and problem behaviour. However, an assessment by the Independent Advisory Council on the Misuse of Drugs has concluded that an outright ban would be disproportionate given the level of risk associated with the gas. Well, earlier I spoke to Katie Balls, political editor of The Spectator magazine. I asked her how serious the splits in the Conservative Party were over immigration.
So I think what's interesting when it comes to the illegal migration bill, initially in Downing Street, this was seen as something that could actually unify the Tory party. There's now, I think, widespread concern about the issue of small boat crossings, particularly electorally. But what we're going to see this week is how, yes, lots of MPs say they want the problem solved, but they've got different ideas on how best to do that. And the Prime Minister is ultimately facing opponents on both the left and the right of his party. So those who take issue with the changes when it comes to a crackdown on modern slavery, and that's more the One Nation wing of the party. And then you have those on the right of the party who think the legislation does not go far enough, and it should include, a wish to leave the ECHR.
I mean, which side of the party do you think he will judge poses him the biggest risk?
So I think it's an interesting one in the sense when it comes to pure arithmetic. those on the left of the party are more likely to find support from opposition politicians. If you think about how Labour could join in, Lib Dems when it comes to this. So I think numerically you have a situation where that would be the most immediate threat. But politically, I think the bigger problem comes from the right of the party. And this call to leave the ECHR.
The ECHR, European Court of Human Rights.
Yes, Rishi Sunak has not completely ruled out leaving the ECHR eventually, but he's saying stick with this legislation and see if it works. And I think what we're going to see this week is the beginning of a push to try and force the Prime Minister into such a position by the time of the next election. Number 10 will be trying to show enough progress until that point to say you don't necessarily need to do that. But I think that's where the political weather is. And of course, for a Prime Minister that's trying to sound very tough on immigration, on migration, having a significant number of MPs in his own party saying he's not tough enough is pretty unhelpful politically in terms of the audience they're trying to reach.
Which is what those on the right want him to push back against.
Yes, and ultimately this idea that Strasbourg, judges can have a say, and they see this as a blocker. If you think about the various reasons the initial planes to Rwanda didn't take off, they think that you should actually, this is the only way that the UK can really be sovereign in its powers on immigration. Now, I think there's plenty of people who say, well, we're not sure if that is the case. And then also, were Rishi Sunak to do that, you would have a big rebellion on the left of the party. There are lots of MPs, and I think there's some ministers who would be really worried about such a thing to do. People will say, well, it puts us in a club of Russia and Belarus if you look at the other countries that are not members of the ECHR. So it's a controversial move, I think, whichever way he goes about this. And it's why Rishi Sunak's hoping with this legislation that he's brought forward that he's got the balance right between doing enough for the right of the party and also to try and make progress before the next election, and also not going so far as to isolate a large chunk of the left of the party who probably would not wear it.
I mean, obviously talking very tough on immigration, a new crackdown on antisocial behaviour, giving communities a say in punishment. Populist policies, will they be popular enough for him, for his party?
So I think the view in Downing Street is effectively on migration. It's become such a symbol of government incompetence amongst their core and their target voters that they have to try and throw everything at it. But the illegal migration bill is just one part of it. Now, Labour also see a route on antisocial behaviour to say that, if you look at Keir Starmer's comments on crime recently, that's an area where they think that they can make gains over the Tories due to, the fact they've been in power for so long. And then I think on immigration, it's become, I think, just a real symbol of government, inability, over-promising, the fact that we've heard so much in rhetoric. And that's why I think small boats is the trickiest thing for Rishi Sunak still, because he's promising a lot. There are figures in his own government who are sceptical of how much he can really do in the next 18 months. And therefore, is he just going to be repeating the mistakes of his predecessors? But that's why you are seeing the government go so far, because they are really running out of options.
Katie Balls, thanks very much for talking to us today.